look, we'll kick off here, and there'll be a few people obviously joining as we're moving through. My name's Barry Toomey. I'm the Centre Director with the Advanced Centre, and I'm based in UCD. And I'm introducing the speakers today for our talk on mitigating cybersecurity risks in smart manufacturing. And just get the slides moving. So I'll be introducing our four speakers in order today. So Dr. Tom Welsh, Dermot O'Sullivan, Dr. Seamus Dowling and Jenny Parry. And then I'll hand over to Liliana Pasquale from the School of Computer Science in UCD, who will be kind of moderating our Q&A session. The Advanced Centre was founded in 2020. It's a collaboration between UCD, ATU and TU Dublin. It was funded under the HCI Pillar 3 initiative, and that's focused on industry future skills needs for Ireland. So Advanced Centre is mostly focused in the area of digital transformation, which does have a very broad kind of catchment, but obviously core within that then is cybersecurity. The Advanced Centre itself is running, I suppose, or offering courses from these three institutes, and the courses would be QQI accredited. They're all done on the NFQ, or the National Framework levels, then between 6 and 9. And it's a mix from modules all the way through to masters. The aim is to make sure that the study options are as flexible as possible, with a mix of online, face-to-face and blended. And then there's also the opportunity for in-company CPD. Following with the university intakes, so there's traditional intakes then in September and January, with limited modules also running during the summer. Across the 11 themes in digital transformation, cybersecurity is one of the core ones, and any courses that we're talking about over the course of the day are available at this website. In terms of the UCD offering in cybersecurity, we've got a program now that's 1 year in, and the second year then is starting in next September. And this is the MSc in cybersecurity. And Liliana Pasquale, who'll be moderating the discussion later, is the program director for this. And what's interesting in this program is how it's constructed. So in terms of the subjects in the graduate certificate, you can take all those modules individually, but if you stack them all together into your 30 credits, you can apply then to have them applied to the graduate certificate. If you want to then move on to the graduate diploma, you can take the next round of modules. And then if you want to finish off the project then with an MSc, you have 3 different options. You can either go with the cybersecurity professional project, the research project, or a mix of teaching and case study. So there's loads of different options. The course has been set up pretty much for practitioners and managers in this area. As well as that then, more recently, we've added cybersecurity awards from ATU. And what's good here in this is that we've obviously a range of different offerings, but then also we're catering for some of the different NFQ levels as well. So there's the MSc in cybersecurity operations, and then the certificate also in that program. And then you've got the certificate in data cybersecurity, network cybersecurity, and the BSc in network cybersecurity. So if you have any questions on these programs, details can be found on the Advanced website. And if you get in touch with us, we'll put you in contact with the right people. So look, I'll hand over to our first speaker now, Tom Welsh, who's going to talk to us. He's a postdoctoral researcher in UL. If you want to join us there, Tom. Okay, you're up. So I think you can, great.
Thanks, Barry. And thank you everyone to the Advanced Centre for giving me the opportunity to talk today. This is a topic I'm very much involved in. I really enjoy talking about it. So I'm basically today going to give a sort of overview about the security of smart manufacturing in the future. And so I'll be using a few academic frameworks we use to discuss some of these topics. And so I just want to start with this quote that was taken from a paper that's widely perceived to be one of the first academic papers about the Industry 4.0 concept. And it's just saying that for the first time, an industrial revolution is predicted before it happens. And so this provides us with opportunities to actively shape its future. And so this is quite an important point from a security perspective, because security and IT domain has been plagued with people developing technologies and protocols and everything else that then require additional security functionality to be bolted on. And so this gives us an opportunity to develop smart manufacturing in a way that is secure by design. And so really in this talk, I'm just going to look into what might this future actually look like, and how will this impact our security in terms of the tools we'll develop and the security of the environment in general. So in 2019, there was a study done at Oxford University, and in this table here is a number of different national frameworks and initiatives that were laid out by various governments that were trying to jump on this notion of laying out the future for smart manufacturing. And what was interesting in this study was they found that none of them actually agreed, and most importantly, that they didn't address, crucially, things like disaster recovery and resilience. And okay, this was done before the pandemic, but we all know from various trade wars, the pandemic itself, that supply chains are incredibly crucial and incredibly fragile, because they deliver all our medicines and electronics. So as we move into this more domain of smart manufacturing, it's really important that we start considering these aspects. So just to give a very brief overview of what we mean by sort of Industry 4.0 and smart manufacturing, this is the general formula people use. So on the left-hand right, we have Industry 1.0, where we used water and steam to power machines in the first instance of the Industrial Revolution. And now we're sort of hanging around the Industry 4, or emerging into the Industry 4 area, where we're using things like machine learning, IoT, and wireless protocols to manage our factories in a more efficient manner. Now, Industry 5.0 is putting into practice the quote I said at the start, when people started to say, okay, actually, we've noticed here that robots really are here coming to take our jobs. And how do we make a more synergistic method of manufacturing that's better for the human experience? And how can we collaborate and build systems that are better for ourselves? So what we're actually kind of seeing here is a sort of paradigm shift into a very high autonomy manufacturing system. And this is what we need to think about securing in the future. So we're moving into this concept of smart products. So a product used to be very passive. We used to manufacture one product at high volume. And now, because of greater customer demand, we now want to move into manufacturing one product, which is highly customized. And so in order to do this, we have smart products which have a digital identity, and they can be customized, they're self-aware, they know where they're going in the supply chain, they can keep a track of the processes that have had to them in the past and what their current requirements are. And they can also self-orchestrate their way through the factory or the supply chain. In order to achieve this, we have smart factories. And so smart factories are now heavily autonomous, or they will become heavily autonomous, able to respond to this increased need for customized goods, but also to become agile in the face of changing market demands, or perhaps environmental or social concerns such as wars or pandemics. And then also we've got this notion of smart working. So this is where people, similar to the Industry 5 concepts, they move from becoming operators of machines to directors who give autonomous machines goals to achieve. And so it's augmenting human behavior as opposed to just allowing them to be part of the system. And this all groups together into what we call a smart supply network, which is a smart supply network is decentralized and allows consumers and producers to come and join the network and react again according to things like environmental concerns. So the driving force of all this is widely considered to be integration. And so integration in three ways is what's considered to be part of Industry 4.0. Now, we know from security that integration is almost the enemy of what we want to achieve, because every time we connect more than one device together, we're increasing our attack surface, okay? And so we think of this firstly as vertical integration. So at the bottom there, we've got the intelligent factory, and at the very top of the pyramid, we've got both the business logic, but also the customer. So vertical integration means a customer can make a change to their product while it's being manufactured or monitoring as it's going. And they can give high-level goals which will impact the systems below. We also have horizontal integration. So as goods come into the factory, the other processes will be aware of this and the timing of it and the amount. So it can be, the processes can be fine-tuned and adjusted in order to perform better. We also have end-to-end integration, which is more of a concern for security, because in order to achieve the sort of smart supply chain networks I mentioned previously, we will have factories integrating their systems with other factories, perhaps across the other side of the world, with different types of technologies. Now, traditionally, this could be easy to accommodate because you might sit down in a business room and you work out a contract and how this is going to happen. But if this needs to suddenly happen very quickly in an autonomous way, our systems and more importantly, our security processes need to be aware of what systems we're interacting with and what are the risks of doing so. So I'm not going to talk too much about different areas of research that people are going into the moment, that's integrating new devices with old devices and how we can secure the current protocols, but instead just two challenges which will affect how we think about security in the future. So the first is data, and we hear this a lot, things like big data with smart cities, machine learning for all its nefarious purposes. But in smart manufacturing, there's also a huge amount of this data. And so the lady here is doing some analysis of the factory, and on the top is this sort of 3D visual representation, which a lot of us today might call a digital twin. And so a digital twin is a high fidelity simulation which allows us to monitor and also manage an entire factory. Now, the data this employs is actually in such a high volume, and it's also volatile, that we're not able to store it, okay? And so it has to be used for this kind of simulation. But then what happens is this data describes the processes, and it's actually the intellectual property. So we have to then think about, if someone wants to come and manipulate this data in order to perhaps cause a particular attack on the factory, how do we go back and trace where it was? We also have a smart product, as I mentioned before, might enter the factory, and now that smart product itself is intellectual property of another producer in the supply chain. Now, you might not have access to that data because it's protected for various reasons. By the time the product's left, you may need to work out what was its path through the network and where it went. So data is a principal concern in the future. So next, we've got the complexity of security, of building security automated surfaces. So, for example, this image in the front here is Dell's supply chain as of 2019. And so you can see if Dell is to suddenly need to determine where threats are occurring or where they might need to search for threats in their supply chain, they're going to be presented with a topology like this and need to work out how to iterate through it. So the first challenge we have here is visibility. How do we maintain visibility of all the assets, of the data, of the people that are within this network, particularly as they may undergo change? Of course, we have the dynamic structure. So as I said, the supply chain can be agile, the products can be agile, and the actual manufacturing context itself can change. So how do we maintain this information? And more crucially, we've got high diversity in this system because we've got different types of devices interconnecting together. We've also got different types of people and different business cultures. So when the systems come to integrate together, in order to produce something, they may have completely different understanding of what data protection means to them, or perhaps they may have different data protection laws in the EU versus the US. Again, this could be managed through sitting down in a room and hashing out a contract or something. But actually, if this needs to happen autonomously and very quickly, how do we manage this in our data protection systems? So one approach we took to this more recently, I did with my colleagues in Lero in the Open University in the UK, was to perform adaptive threat detection of supply chains. So how this worked was we'd model supply chain like this as a graph on the left-hand side, and then efficiently try to assign value to each one of the assets in the supply chain. So for example, a different process would be more valuable to the consumer than another process. We then consider at each point in time, how much money do we have to detect threats? For example, how much does it cost us to turn off this machine or shut down this production process? And what is the risk of a threat actually occurring at this point. And so this allowed us to adaptively draw individual inspection zones around the supply chain in different areas that would change as the supply chain changed, and allowed us to essentially reduce threat detection by up to about 90% computational effort. So I guess one of my main take-home messages here is that this is a very, very exciting field, and it's very interesting, but things change very quickly. And so it's important to, when you think about the next stage of security engineering or process you're going to develop, to think about how it's going to impact in the future. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. I'll pass back to Barry.
Okay, thanks very much, John. That was very interesting. I suppose naturally follow on from that, I'll introduce Dermot O'Sullivan. So he's the Associate Director of Global Cyber Incident Response in Regeneron. So I suppose giving you the in-factory experience. Thank you. I'll hand over to you now, Dermot.
Yeah. Thanks, Will, Barry. Yep. So I'm based down in the manufacturing facility in Raheen in Limerick, part of the Regeneron Pharmaceuticals. We also have our international headquarters in Dublin. And I suppose my role within the Regeneron team is cyber incident response globally across all types of environments. So everything from research and development sites, manufacturing sites, warehousing, small satellite offices, and big, headquarter places. So very, very diverse, but we've been concentrating a lot of our effort over the last few years on securing the manufacturing site. One of the interesting things I find is there's a lot of headlines at the moment. A lot of what we would call FUD, or fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But time and time again, really, a lot of these cyber incidents that happen, whether they're in this operational technology or manufacturing technology area, or even in more traditional IT systems, is basic cyber hygiene will be very, very effective against a lot of this stuff. Very recent report published by Microsoft highlighted that basic hygiene can prevent 98% of attacks. When it comes to that basic hygiene, you're going to get a very, very different opinion on what that is. A lot of people will, talk about like multi-factor authentication or encryption and all these different types of technologies. But we try and simplify it into having good configuration management, concentrating on your asset management, and then especially on the OT side or manufacturing side, looking at your network segmentation. In a more traditional IT environment, we probably would prioritize things like phishing as well, but that seems to be less of a problem where in the manufacturing area. Configuration management tends to be quite good in many manufacturing industries because of the change, the very I suppose regimented change processes that are involved, and the fact that a lot of these systems have to be up and running for a long time. But what you do have to consider is when a change is required to help maintain the operations of your plant. How do you do that, and how do you configure and manage those environments to make sure that they are staying in a baseline that is both secure and operating very, very effectively? Asset management was kind of mentioned earlier as well by Tom, but basically we can't secure what we don't know about, and asset management has always been a primary focus, not just for security teams, but for IT and these OT teams as well. And to be able to identify an asset, or identify an asset that shouldn't be in an area or on a network, is very, very important. And then the network segmentation, there's plenty of frameworks, there's plenty of reference material that you can get on network segmentation. So like a very effective one, the Purdue ISA 95 model, but there are many more out there. Network segmentation is very, very important for your manufacturing site or manufacturing areas. What What I do find though is it is very, very important that you are looking at your technical controls and verifying some of those things around, especially around your network segmentation. So one of the things I definitely struggled with when I first started becoming familiar with like a GMP or GXP environment is that mind shift change that you have to have. So if you talk to, I suppose, a traditional cybersecurity professional, it's all about, patching everything when the patches become available. They'll, push down security tools down onto a system. Maybe there's a bit of cloak and daggers. Maybe you're not even sure how your security team operates. And that does have to change an awful lot when you start looking at manufacturing systems. Security have to bring value to the business and not always be dictating. For example, I suppose the big pain point for a lot of organizations is patching and how frequent they should or should not be patching. And it's very important, again, going back to your visibility and your technical controls, is understanding a risk. So if we have a vulnerability and it's a 9.9 CVSS and it's an emergency update for, say, your typical IT systems, that may not be the case because you might have technical controls or you might have network segmentation in place to help mitigate that risk or lower that risk. So even though, your own internal environmental score might bring down that severity down a notch. And what we have found is it's very difficult to get that skill set where you have a cybersecurity person who is familiar with the manufacturing environment. I know we certainly didn't have it to begin with, and it's very important to have cross-functional teams, cross-functional meetings, whereby you can share, discuss, and consult with others on how to better secure your environments. One thing that we continually find success with is, instead of pushing the term security or cyber around the place, it's about data integrity, because that's something that a lot of manufacturing people understand. They understand if something can impact data integrity, that can impact operations, it can impact product, and therefore it's a language that they understand and they will want to engage and talk with you around. The other thing just to talk about then is your typical security events. So this is something I get asked quite frequently is, is such and such a tool detecting threats? What kind of incidents have we had in the OT environment? And I think a lot of people on this call will be familiar with things like, Stuxnet. We would have had NotPetya, WannaCry, some of the more under the radar ones like eCans or Snake, all these different type of malware that have either purposefully looked to infect OT systems or by accident ended up getting into OT systems and shutting down manufacturing operations all across the globe. And again, going back to the basic hygiene, what I see on the floor is unapproved USB devices being plugged in. Sometimes it's unintentional, sometimes it's a vendor. You go through your processes and procedures, but still, we find time and time again unauthorized USB usage, people trying to circumvent security controls to try and plug in devices that aren't authorized on the network. The other item that we've seen is unapproved devices being connected and often then connected back to the internet. So things like power meter readers or software that gets installed on a system, or like some sort of BAS component which gets installed on a network, or even create their own local network. So you'll create a new network, so you don't have to maybe comply with some of the standards that are being pushed by the security or the IT/OT technology teams on the plant. And then I suppose the biggest one is then the lack of network segmentation. and also the visibility that the security team sometimes can lack into these environments. So going back to, if you don't know what you have, how can you secure it, or how can you respond to something if you don't know it exists? A lot of people use different ways to do network segmentation, but again, what we find is sometimes they're not quite as segmented as maybe you initially had thought they were. And this has led to us developing a program around validating our technical controls. So we're currently using breach and attack simulators, whereby we kind of clone systems that are similar to OT devices with this technology, and they will perform actions that should activate your technical controls, whether it's simulating a malware infection, or simulating data exfiltration, or simulating someone trying to reach out of your network. And then you can see what are your technical controls alerting, but also, like, is your security operations center reacting to these different alerts that are being activated through these simulations. So that has been very, very useful with some very interesting findings, especially around network segmentation. The big thing for me is making sure that you maintain situational awareness. Technology is moving quite quickly. There is always something to learn about. There's always a new novel method of circumventing technical controls. And it is very, very important that you maintain your situational awareness. Some organizations like our own, we have cyber threat intelligence teams that can push out this information to us internally. Other organizations mightn't be so fortunate, or perhaps your security team don't reach you. So I would encourage you to, be engaged with your vendor, be engaged with alerts, whether it's our own national cybersecurity center that we have here in Ireland now, or using other ones like the US ones and the UK ones. They can provide some very, very valuable information. I myself am also involved in things like the Health ISAC, where many other pharmaceutical companies come together to share security information. While we may compete for, say, customers and healthcare professionals, our motto is we never compete on security. And sharing information there has been a very, very valuable resource for us. There are other organizations like Cyber Ireland, which hopefully most people are aware of, and also FIRST, which is the Forum of Incident Response Security Teams. These are quite diverse and not always, say, OT specific or manufacturing specific, but again, a great way to learn from peers and people in similar positions to yourself, sharing ideas and getting ideas around automation and things like that. I have 2 links down below as well around resources and blogs. That's just like keeping abreast with your own personal stuff, your own that you like. Robert M. Lee is probably the best known cybersecurity person on OT and manufacturing technologies, and he has a very, very interesting blog, and he also has a huge list of resources and things from technology tools that you can use all the way to how to get started in your career in OT security. And then the last one I wanted to mention as well is something, again, that I've been involved in the past, is something called the Bioforum. Now, this is very specific to biotechnology and pharmaceutical industries. There may be others if you're in the automotive industry or brewing industry or other ones like that. But again, find this very, very useful. There's some very tangible things that you can get out of it. One of the big ones that I wanted to highlight here today is the digital plant maturity model, where you basically have a tool which is like, I suppose, a glorified Excel spreadsheet where you can self-assess and see what level of maturity your plant or plants are at, which again is a very, very useful tool for planning, whether planning and strategy around what you're doing. So there are all the items I wanted to cover, and if there's any questions, please use the Q&A, and hopefully we can get back to you on that one. So thanks, Barry.
Great. Thanks for that, Dermot. So next up, we'll be introducing Seamus Dowling. He's the program chair and lecturer in cybersecurity in ATU, and I suppose will talk to us a little bit about some of the different options and journey options for upskilling and training in the area, and then also maybe a little bit about the emerging role of machine learning in cybersecurity. So I'll hand over to Seamus.
Thanks very much, Barry, and thanks very much to the Advanced Centre for inviting me to speak. I am a program chair. I'm based at the Mayo campus of ATU Galway Mayo, and I am also part of researcher associated with Lero as well, and a few other information there on Twitter handles, etc. What I want to talk to you a little bit about today is, I suppose, very quickly just look at the World Economic Forum Global Risk Report associated with cyber threats and critical infrastructure. In a previous life, I worked as an IT project coordinator in the HSE. So my research since I came into academia is very much geared towards the Internet of Medical Things. Dermot just talked very much about OT in the manufacturing space. And a lot of the threats and incidents associated with malware and cyber attacks in the OT space very much translate certainly into the area of healthcare. Healthcare is going through very much a digital transformation as well. So Internet of Medical Things, I think, slots nicely into this concept of smart society. And I suppose because we have a number of academic providers here, and I know and Dermot has just talked about from an industry perspective, and I know we have maybe industry people on the webinar as well. I suppose it would be good maybe to have a look at some case studies about how we in academia create programs and modules and upskilling opportunities to cater for what industry needs. And it'd be good to look at maybe some people that have actually come through that process and the various avenues associated with that. So I suppose the very first one is just look at the global perception of threats very quickly. Some of you are probably familiar with the Global Risk Report from the World Economic Forum. That's that think tank that takes place in Davos every year. It's available free for download. And I suppose when we actually look at it and drill down into it, I have just circled here, widespread cybercrime and cyber insecurity. If you look at on the left column, it's over 2 years, and longer term over 10 years. It hasn't changed. It doesn't change. It remains constant. I know for the last number of years, for example, dominating the 2-year cycle would have been such as viruses, as regards pandemic and pathogens. And if you look over towards the 10 years, what's dominating, I suppose, the risks associated for global risks would be everything that climate change, biodiversity loss, all the stuff that we understand. But what remains constant in every year I've been looking at this is the fact that cyber crime and cyber infrastructure and critical infrastructure always remains constant in there in the top 10. And I suppose if I drill down further, anybody can download this report, and you drill down a little bit further, you'll see that in the top right-hand quadrant, I suppose, which is the higher number of respondents and the higher ranking right now, obviously, energy supply crisis, cost of living crisis, and rising inflation dominate the top right quadrant. But also in there as well is cyber attacks on critical infrastructure. So very much around the area of smart manufacturing and very much around the area of critical infrastructure and OT. That has always been there, and it's high up on people's minds and people's consciousness as regards what constitutes a global risk and a global threat. So I just very quickly, I just wanted to have a quicker look at that one there. I suppose if I wanted to look at the existing research of Internet of Medical Things, this is very much the own research that I'm involved in, obviously within ATU. And I suppose coming from working in the HSE West, my interest is always going to be in this space. And I suppose if I'm talking about it, when you're talking about something like cybersecurity, it's always good to have a couple of flashy headlines that pop up on various forums or websites. And there's constant cases of cyber attacks on vulnerable systems within the Internet of Medical Things. So, and a lot of this pertains to using protocols. A lot of the devices that we're talking about, Internet of Medical Things, don't have the robustness or the footprint to be able to implement robust security or encryption. They are compromisable from if they're internet facing or even over the air attacks as well. So it is a real thing, this cyber threats associated with internet and medical things. So I have a master's student and other research involved in the deployment, looking at the deployment in cybersecurity in Ireland and securing advanced high-tech medical equipment. It's a funded project. And I suppose we are concentrating on what we know, which are rolled out across the country, is tens of thousands of what we know as defibrillators. So they're either called AMDs or AEDs. And a lot of the newer versions of the devices are accessible, remotely accessible for administration purposes. And they are invariably fitted with maybe some kind of a communications chip, maybe a 4G communications chip or platform or stack as well. And also the new concept is that when incident responders attend a cardiac arrest, that the ambulance or whatever vehicle is actually coming there is actually able to pick up the traffic from the AED. And similarly, they're looking for that these AEDs will actually transmit this information back towards maybe A&E or the emergency department. And I suppose if we have any devices like that that are remotely accessible, then you are open to all unauthorized access, data breaches, communication vulnerabilities, and malware attacks. So we're looking at something that's deployed in every community. And I know even here where I live at the moment, I know in the small town, there's about 7 or 8 of them deployed around the various locations like post offices and churches and Tesco's and supermarkets and stuff like that. So they are all remotely accessible. And I suppose some interesting research that we've come across is the incidence of OHCA, which is out of hospital cardiac arrests with resuscitation using defibrillators. And you can see it's kind of stark reading, I suppose, and it's pretty constant across the country, whether it's across HU's region of the West, whether it's on the East or whether it's the South, the numbers of OHCA event or incidents that take place around the country. And so it is a relevant topic, and it's a relevant piece of research to look at how these devices are maintained and accessible. So that research is ongoing. Another piece of research, I suppose myself, I was traveled to Dallas last year on a Fulbright Tech Impact Scholarship. Texas has a population of about 30 million people. And so not unlike the academic institutions across Ireland, I suppose, each region would specialize in a particular discipline. And I suppose when I was working in Dallas, I was working in a particular school on computer science and science and engineering. And Thomas mentioned Industry 4.0 and this whole notion of bringing machine learning. So in my previous research, I looked at using reinforcement learning, which is a form of machine learning, and how we can actually make devices in the Internet of Things and the industrial Internet of Things sphere, how we can make them more robust. And the research I was working on over in Dallas was actually using a form of machine learning called federated machine learning, secure IoT communications and deployment. So how they fund research over in America is very different from how we do it over here. Industry is very much involved. They're very linked in. They fund institutions to perform or conduct research on their behalf. So the likes of Texas Instruments, I was involved in AT&T, Cisco, NASA, the Army Research Office, some of the industries that were involved in that. So it was a very interesting view on how industry and academia coexist. And I suppose if I just look at this image, this is a stock image of all the potential devices that are associated with Internet of Medical Things. What we were doing is we were building a test bed, a sensor, and looking at all the various communication platforms, such anything from hardware, so all the small devices, Arduino, Raspberry, Galileo, etc., and all the various protocols that we could use, so all the wireless protocols such as Zigbee, Bluetooth, LoRaWAN, 4G, 5G, etc., all the ones that we know about, and all the communication protocols, I suppose, at a different layer that can actually be embedded upon them, and the various maybe cloud platforms and models that are associated with them. And we are building a platform whereby we could run different machine learning and federated machine learning algorithms to secure the data at device level before that's actually communicated back to maybe a central repository site. So really, really interesting piece of research. There's publications going on with that as well, and kind of continuous research associated with that. So that's just a little bit of my own research, I suppose, associated with ATU. Barry at the beginning talked about all the programs that are on offer, whether irrespective of whether that's UCD, whether that's TUD, whether that's ATU, or whatever other three-letter acronym associated with academic institutions. But right across Ireland, academia are developing cybersecurity programs because industry demands that we facilitate that. So I suppose the number about 4 or 5 years ago, we sat down with HP Enterprises, Hewlett Packard, based here in Galway, and we came up with a suite of programs, and that's what Barry mentioned earlier on at level 7, level 8, and level 9. And irrespective of whether this is ATU or whether, as I say, it's any of the other academic institutions, I decided it would be good to look at actual real-world examples of how students and the diverse range of students can access these pathways to become cyber qualified or upskill or reskill, and just to kind of create that talent pipeline for industry. So as I say, we sat down with Hewlett Packard Enterprises and developed these suites. So the first one I want to look at is somebody called Hannah. I just used their first name, but if I just look at a case study associated with Hannah had a level 8 honors degree in psychology, but had also done some IT cyber related certificates. And within academia, there's a concept called RPL, which is recognition for prior learning. So based on that, Hannah was able to get in on a level 7 30 credit special purpose minor award. She did those 30 credits, and she went on the following year to do another 30 credits and then earn her level 7 degree. So in the space of 2 years, she pivoted completely from a previous qualification of psychology into cybersecurity, and she's now working based here in Mayo and working for a US cybersecurity company. I talk to her all the time. She's constantly traveling over and back, and she's earning great money working for this US company. So that's just one example of somebody coming from a completely different avenue. Another person then is David, who is just finishing up our level 8. David had no formal IT qualifications, but was working in a very high-end position in IT in a semi-state company. And again, through the RPL process, he came in and started in year 1. He did level 7 in network cybersecurity. In the second year, he's done level 7 in data cybersecurity. And he's just finished this year in a level 8 cybersecurity risk and compliance. And as I said, with HP Enterprises, when we sat down with them, they said we really need to have skill sets with students or graduates in the area, for example, governance, risk, and compliance. They need to know that, as well as the technical stuff of cybersecurity architecture. They need to know what a SIEM system was, how to analyze data, and they need to know the fundamentals of, for example, the data law and ethics and procedures and protocols associated with what an organization requires from cyber insurance, and being compliant as well. And so David is now currently finishing this one and wants to go on and do a master's. So over the period of 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 years, David has gone from no formal qualifications to completely upskilling and reskilling in that space. And I suppose the last person I'm just going to talk about is somebody called Maria as well. Maria came in from a different point of data analytics. So she already had a level 8 in data analytics. And with us, she did a level 9 special purpose minor award in cybersecurity operations. And she is now currently working on a master's funded research fellowship. So she gets paid to do on a fellowship that I'm PI on. And it's associated with that Internet of Medical Things, deployments of cybersecurity, as I mentioned earlier on. So looking at AEDs or defibrillators being deployed globally, or sorry, not globally, but nationally around the country. So that's just 3 very small case studies associated with how, I suppose, academia are trying to kind of create that talent pipeline for industry. And I suppose it's incumbent upon us and to sit down with industry and, like Dermot mentioned earlier on, to talk about what's required and what skill sets are required by industry. That's it. Thank you very much. If anybody needs to reach out and talk to me about any of these, feel free to reach out on any of those social media platforms or using my email there as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Seamus, and thanks for giving us that great overview on the pathways there. I think that's kind of probably the biggest thing to highlight with all these activities that are going on in the HCI Pillar 3 is there's pathways there. You don't have to have that background. You've got the options with the level 7s, 8s, and if you want to keep going all the way on to 9 and getting your master's there. So I think next on that theme, then I'm just going to introduce Jenny Parry. And Jenny's working as an associate director around cyber risk for Aon. And I suppose probably integrating all the different things we've heard the other speakers talk about, I suppose from, the good manufacturing practices, integration, and then actually convincing people we need to do this, so, and then also nicely, Jenny's in the process of completing year 1 of the MSc in cybersecurity. So I'll hand over between Liliana and Jenny to take us through the next stage.
Thanks, Barry.
Thank you, Barry. I just want to say thank you, Jenny, for attending. Jenny is a student in the Master in Cybersecurity in UCD. And I just would like to ask you, Jenny, what drew you to the Master in Cybersecurity here at UCD?
Yeah, so I actually completed computer science with UCD in 2015. It just felt right to kind of come back to the same place. I had a really great experience for the 4 years I was doing the undergrad, and I got so much support. So I kind of knew, like, I knew what to expect from UCD. It is one of the best in the countries. Also, that the module offered as part of the course are exactly what I need at this point in my career as well. So that's why it just felt like the right move for me.
So can you tell us more about what are your favorite aspects of attending the Master in Cybersecurity in UCD?
So I think the biggest part of it is building the network. So I suppose there's a lot of technical people in technical roles. Sometimes you get hit with a question you just don't know how to answer. So it's great to have a network of people that you can reach out, have specialists. And there's such a wide range of people taking part in the program as well. So like there's people there from the NSC, there's people there from Microsoft. So you've got a good melting pot of everything. I also think doing the in-person lectures are really beneficial. I think after coming through the pandemic, we all went very, very virtual for a very long time. So it's nice to actually be on campus, walk around, have lunch with the other students. And again, it just helps if you're working on assignments or something, you can have those conversations. It just makes it so much easier. I also really like the fact that I'm learning stuff that I can use. So as part of my job, I advise Aon's clients about cyber insurance, cyber maturity, all that kind of good stuff. So there is topics of the course that were done that were really, really fresh in my mind when I was on client calls. And I just think that that's been very powerful. It's kind of raised my own kind of reputation a little bit more as a cyber specialist, which is the goal. That's what I'm really here for. So I think it's very, very interesting stuff at a very timely point.
That is great. So I just very curious about to know if you could give us a bit more details about a specific project or topic that was particularly useful in your work experience.
Yeah, so I suppose the biggest thing is I'm just closing out on the law module at the moment, and I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but we have NIS2 is coming down the tracks. So I had to write a report on NIS2 for college, but I was then able to use that for work as well, because as part of my role, I provide training to everyone else. So I've turned my report, which I got an A on, into a training deck, which I'm then delivering across the Aon teams, both in Ireland and the Nordics. I've also kind of been thinking about doing like readiness assessments and that kind of stuff. So it's using the information I'm getting from UCD, understanding it fully myself, and then being able to kind of apply it to my own colleagues and clients. So that's been really good. As well, I was a risk manager for a couple of years as well. So it's really nice to get back and do the kind of the risk management work and risk assessments, picking up new tips and tricks. Like it's been brilliant. I'm really, really enjoying it.
Thank you. And, also on the other end, I'm wondering if you found anything particularly challenging or any difficulties in your path as a student in UCD so far.
So I think the most challenging part, and there'll be no surprises when I say this, it's managing the workload and managing time. So I'm a mother, I've got 2 teenagers. As I mentioned, I work with Aon, so I've got a full-time job. I sleep and eat and watch TV as well. So it's been very kind of tricky just to kind of get it back into that student mindset. You know, as I said, I've mentioned I had done the undergrad, but it was a full-time kind of thing then, and I was, you know, I was properly maintained for that. So it's just finding the time, either daily, weekly, putting the effort in, because if you don't put the work in, you're not going to get the results. And I think as well, signing up for the program, I knew it was going to be a big body of work. What I can say is everything is there on the website. So if anyone was worried about it, you can go in, you can drill down, you can find exactly how much time is expected for the modules. So you can kind of do that pre-work and understand what's required. But I think it all comes down to finding the balance. You have to be able to, as I said, sleep, eat, mind your children, do your job, and then have time to kind of study at the end.
Thank you very much. And is there any additional advice that you will give to people who are considering, professional who are considering enrolling in the master?
I think definitely go for it, do it. The fact that it's the first year, like it's only going to get better. One of the things I love about working in cyber is the fact it's ever changing, right? It's nearly like we're playing a game with the attackers. It's one step forward, two steps back. And I think you have to keep the knowledge fresh. I also think as well, as we move into more of a cloud environment, people's infrastructures are going to start changing. There's going to be new questions and new things to consider. And as well, like with new threats coming out every day, new 0 days, like it's just a matter of staying on top. You cannot stay on top if you don't have up-to-date knowledge. So I'd say definitely sign up for the course, go for it.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Thank you so much. So
and thank you for having me on.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I'm gonna open up the space and also ask questions to all the panelists here. I can see there are questions that have already been asked on the Q&A tab. And so I can see there is a question for Diarmuid. A lot of cybersecurity products are focused on the IT environment and are not as mature in the OT world. And can you discuss your experience so far with cybersecurity products?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And I suppose just in case, I'm not going to bash or push any vendors, but I probably will end up mentioning some. So you're very right. So like in the past, some traditional security tools like vulnerability scanners have been known to knock off systems. Like I know I had a particular instance where I knocked off a Yokogawa with a malformed ping request. You know, so these kind of things can be very, very intrusive. Your traditional tools may not always translate very well into the OT environment. I've had to learn that lesson the hard way myself. There are some OT tools out there, OT specific tools, but I think you're right. They come with a bit of a warning. A lot of these tools aren't as mature as their IT counterparts. So you do have to test and validate them very, very thoroughly. My own personal experience, anything that needs to be on the endpoint. So if you've got like an agent that needs to sit on a system, I would definitely be very, very cautious around those tools. Where I have had better success is the OT specific tools that are at the network layer, unintrusive, kind of more like they're kind of like an IPS IDS system, but even less intrusive, and they're tuned in a way that they will help you get visibility into the network, pick up vulnerabilities without having to like probe and poke at these systems. So I will just kind of mention tools, mention 3 the vendor names. 2 I've had direct experience with. So Armis and Clarity are 2 ones that I've personal experience with, and I'm aware of a 3rd one by a company called Dragos. So they're the kind of the industry leading stuff that's going out there at the moment. I have some endpoint related ones as well. Haven't had great experience with any of them, being very brutally honest about it. But it is a very, very good question, and it goes back to that mindset that you have to have. You know, if you're a cybersecurity analyst and you've come from a traditional, you know, SOC or security operations center, you definitely need to be very wary. What worked for you previously may not translate well into the manufacturing world. So yeah, really good. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I actually, since you are already here, I have a clarification question about the most typical attacks that you experience in your company. And I was very surprised not to see any ransomware mentioned. in the typical type of attack, and why is that the case?
So ransomware is so it makes all the headlines, right? So ransomware, but the traditional vectors of attack for ransomware is still phishing emails, and it's still like open RDP ports. Phishing is usually not seen in the manufacturing area just because of data integrity, and you don't want your networks open there. I'm not saying that everyone has it that way, but that is traditionally why. And I suppose when I was saying what I see, I'm talking about maybe the OT environment. However, I have seen in the past misconfigured servers. So the one in particular was a server that had power metering software on it. And the people who were managing that system thought that it was subcontracted out to a managed service provider. They thought that they just had a point-to-point VPN and that everything was secure. However, what they didn't know is they did have an RDP port open exposed to the internet, and that server did get compromised and did have ransomware, but it was, again, because of network segmentation, it was limited to just one system. And it was one of those kind of networks as well that was kind of unmanaged, unmaintained. So it was one of those kind of local networks that, again, not a lot of people knew about it. So like these types of things do happen, especially if your organization is growing or getting bigger. And the big one as well is like mergers and acquisitions. So if you've taken over a company and their level of maturity mightn't be to what you are used to, you might start finding these little dark corners of computer networks scattered around your environment. So always keep your eyes open.
Thank you. And actually, talking about network, there is a question from one of the speakers, and is asking whether software-defined networks are prevalent in the realm of OT.
So is this for me? Sorry.
Well, yes, I guess it's still for you.
So, so there is more and more use of things like cloud systems and software-defined networking in the manufacturing space. It isn't as cutting edge maybe as in some other industries. But I suppose like where I would be going with that is like looking at microsegmentation, which is a very, very powerful tool once you have like that level of maturity, but we currently don't have that where I'm working at the moment.
Okay, thank you. And I guess this is a general question for all the speakers. And what is your opinion about how the NIS2 compliance is gonna impact the smart manufacturing sector? And is this an opportunity, or what are your views on this topic?
So you're talking about the EU NIS2 directive?
NIS2, yes.
Yeah. So this really impacts me because I'm directly involved in cyber incident response, and the big thing for us is the requirement to report cyber incidents. And a lot of these, there's a lot of different standards, and there's new regulations coming, like SEC regulations coming from the US as well. And it's the definitions aren't very locked down. So what I might consider like an impacting cybersecurity incident might be different to what someone else thinks is a cybersecurity incident. So there's still a lot of angst around what that is going to mean for us and reporting. And the other thing is the NIS2 directive around reporting. So if we have, we're a growing global organization. If we have a cyber incident, am I required to report it into every single jurisdiction, every member state in the EU, in each different language? So there's a lot of things that I'm apprehensive about, but ultimately I like where this is going. We do need, consistency. We do need like these kind of wide guiding principles to help cybersecurity professionals and to show the the business need to have strong cybersecurity skill sets and educated people to be able to help companies navigate some of these directives. And every company has its own journey to go on. But I do suggest that if anyone on the call is in the industry and is not aware of the NIS2 directive, they do need to be very wary because it is coming down, and it's coming down fast.
Thank you. So we are reaching the end of this webinar. So I'm going to ask all the panelists to step in and to answer to a quick question, all of you. So this is still a question from one of the attendees, and is asking, from your different backgrounds and experience, what is the best way to earn practical experience in OT cybersecurity? And especially for someone who is at the start. So we can start from Diarmuid, and then I'll call each of you to answer this question.
So two things, and maybe I can post in the chat. There is a link to Robert M. Lee's kind of guide to. So I would just have a look at that, read it for yourself. Is it for you? And then the other thing I would do is especially if you're starting out in your career, get the technical skills. They will stand to you as you progress in your career. So things like Hack the Box or Try Hack Me, excellent resources, free more often than not, and they're excellent resources.
Thank you. Tom, would you like to answer this question?
Yeah, I would just echo what Dermot said there, and the technical skills are really important. And it doesn't actually cost much using virtualization technologies to set up your own test bed, on your own laptop, and you can emulate different architectures and try different attacks and things like that. So having your own enclosed environment where you can not only learn to secure these things, but also set them up and attack them as well is really important.
Thank you, Tom. Seamus?
Yeah, I think probably echoing what last Thomas and Diarmuid said as well. Certainly, if you just want to dip your toe in and you really need to kind of find out whether you've got the skills yourself and you really want to explore this a little bit more, lots of free open source available programs and courses out there, anything from simply like running something like Kali Linux to ethical hacking to maybe social engineering. A lot of organizations then do offer kind of internships and returnships to try and get students and graduates, or not, you don't even have to be in college, just to get students in, because they do need people to man tier 1 or to be on tier 1 desk or basic incident response. And often they do offer, as I say, some of these internships.
Thank you, Seamus. And Jenny?
Yeah, I'd say just as the men have said there, just get out there, try and kind of run around sandbox and see if you like it. That's really all you can do.
Okay. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the panelists, and also to thank Joanna and Barry for organizing this, and Sinead for organizing this seminar.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
But